Hey, Happy New Year. Good morning, Asbury Church. I'm Tom Carver, the senior pastor here at the Asbury Church, and you have made it to 2021, to a new year. And so we are excited to start the new year together, and we're doing it with a new sermon series about influence and how to have Christian leadership in a social media world. So I'm glad you're here to be a part of that. As we begin, though, we're going to start with a hymn that is often played at the annual conference gathering of pastors. It's an old Wesleyan hymn, and if you hear the words, it's kind of like, "And are we yet alive?" It's meant to be when they gather once a year, they'd look around, all the preachers, and they'd say, who's still here? Are we still alive? And they would have known their colleagues, their other friends of pastors who would have passed away since the last time they gathered. And they would all talk about all the conflicts we've seen and all the stuff we've been through, and yet aren't we still here and can expect what God has for us next? So we thought that was kind of a fitting way to start the new year. Look around, and even though we're online, we can look and say, and yet we're still here. Are we yet alive? And we've got now a job to do. So this is an old Wesleyan hymn. Joe Buck is singing it, and are we yet alive?
And are we yet alive, and see each other's face? Glory and thanks to Jesus give for his almighty grace. What troubles have we seen? What mighty conflicts past, fightings without and fears within, since we assembled last. Yet out of all the Lord hath brought us by his love, and still he doth his help afford, and hides our light above. Let us take up the cross till we the crown obtain, and gladly reckon all things lost, so we may Jesus gain.
Happy New Year, Asbury. This is Pastor Heather with your announcements for Sunday, January 3rd, 2021. So it's a new year and a new month, and that means time for a new challenge from your Asbury Stewards of Creation. This month, you are challenged to make your own challenge. So if you follow the Stewards of Creation Facebook page, you can find out more information about how you can craft your own challenge for caring for creation this month and in the whole year to come. Here at Asbury, most Sundays we have a small group or small groups meeting before online worship on Zoom. And we're excited that we're having a new group starting up next Sunday, January 10th. Ralph Otteson will be teaching a class about John Wesley, who is the founder of the Methodist movement. Ralph's been wanting to teach this class for a while, and we're excited that he'll be able to offer it starting next week via Zoom, and it will go until Easter, so that's early April. So if you want to join for the whole time or pop in and out, you can reach out to Ralph for that Zoom link, or you can reach out to the office for more information about how you can join this short-term study. A new year also means new opportunities to lead and to grow. And this year we're doing something we've never done before. We're doing a new leader orientation, an all-church orientation for everyone who's on a committee or leading a committee, whether it's new to you or you've been doing it for years. We're going to have an all-church leadership meeting on Monday, January 11th at 6:30 on Zoom. Information about that was sent out via email this week. If you didn't get that email or if you have more questions, you can reach out to the office, and we sure hope that you will join us so that we can all be on the same page and all be working towards the same goals for the ways that God is calling us into new ways of being in 2021. Today we have a bonus announcement in that it is Communion Sunday, the first Sunday of the month. We offer communion as a drive-in option immediately following worship. So you can grab your bread, grab your juice for communion, get in your car, drive on to the church right after worship today. We are changing things in that we are now going to be parking on the north side of Mississippi Boulevard. We won't be in that parking lot across the street. We will be there right in front of the church. If you went for Christmas Eve drive-in communion, you know what we're talking about. So back into a spot on the north part of Mississippi Boulevard and turn your radio to 95.5 and we will share together in the sacrament of communion. And that should start about 11:45 today. I hope that you had a wonderful New Year's Eve and that you're prepared for all the wonderful ways that God is calling us into new ways of being and new exciting things in 2021. Have a great week.
Okay, thanks, Pastor Heather. Looking forward to communion with everyone. And just also a note that actually Joe Buck and Ken Jones sang that duet on And Are We Yet Alive? You know, as we start the new year and starting this new sermon series, I thought it would be appropriate that we would start with the Gospel of John. So if you're at home, wherever you're at, you can get your Bibles out, take a look at that, read along. Michael's going to read for it in just a second, but I want to set it up for you. This is the beginning of John's Gospel, and we know there are 4 Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Matthew, Mark, and Luke are all very similar. They tell the stories in different orders, but it's a lot of the same patterns, same stories. The Gospel of John is very different than all the others. So when the other Gospels start with Matthew and Luke start with the story of the birth of Jesus, John goes back even farther. And John would have had more of like a Greek-oriented philosophical audience that he was writing to. And so look how he begins. It's more like almost like the book of Genesis. He goes back to the very beginning and again echoes the words of Genesis, in the beginning. So as we start this new year, it's kind of a good way to kind of start about in the beginning. And John uses this Greek philosophical image of the Word with the Logos, which was meant to be God sort of brought together. A Logos or word is a gathering of all the thoughts and things of God and expressed in a word, who is Jesus. And so Michael, if you'll share with us, this is the Gospel of John, chapter 1, and we're going to read the first 14 verses.
Thank you, Pastor Tom. Will you please read along with me? This is John chapter 1, verses 1 through 14. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things came into being through him, and without him not one thing came into being. What has come into being in him was life, and the life was the light of all people. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness did not overcome it. There was a man sent from God, whose name was John. He came as a witness to testify to the light, so that all might believe through him. He himself was not the light, but he came to testify to the light. The true light, which enlightens everyone, was coming into the world. He was in the world, and the world came into being through him. Yet the world did not know him. He came to what was his own, and his own people did not accept him. But to all who received him, who believed in his name, he gave power to become children of God, who were born not of blood or of the will of the flesh or of the will of man, but of God. And the Word became flesh and lived among us, and we have seen his glory, the glory as of a Father's only Son, full of grace and truth. This is the word of God for the people of God. Thanks be to God. Well, good morning again, everyone. It is a pleasure to be here with you this morning as we continue our worship in a time of prayer. I want to wish everyone a happy new year. I hope that the celebrations were great. I hope that the outlook that you have for you and your family is bright. I hope it's exciting, and I hope things continue down that path for all of us. I want to remind you about JesusIsTheBridge.org. You can go there at any time, and you can leave your prayers. You just click on the prayer button, and you can leave your prayers there, and a member or members of our prayer team will pray for you, and they will pray specifically that prayer that you have left. If you've been leaving other things on Facebook, please know that I do not have some of those as I transitioned up here today. But as you are all listening out there, I would encourage you to take time to read through the Facebook feed so that you can see the prayers that need to be lifted up. In the good news, the Star Words came out. If you remember, we did Star Words at the beginning of last year, hopefully a word that helped guide you through the year. So the Star Words came out in the good news this week. Hopefully, you can choose a word that will be a joy and inspiration for you as you guide yourself through 2021. Prayers for April Crowder on the loss of her sister Kelly. We're sending prayers to your family, April. Prayers also for Denise Gerson and a neighbor that fell on the ice, kind of a tricky time of year. So I want you all to be careful out there, but prayers for them and for others that have fallen on this ice. Be very careful. Mike Brand asked this morning for prayers for his brother's family. His sister-in-law's mother has terminal cancer, and things are looking a bit worse. They have 2 small boys, and the fear is that they won't really understand what is happening. So prayers for their family, and prayers for Mike and his family as well. Heather Dennis has asked for prayers for her aunt Yvonne, who is fighting COVID. Prayers for Rick Reed's dad, Bob, who is in the hospital with pneumonia, and also a prayer for his mom, Pat, as she is at home and continues to get better. As I've continued to look around Facebook this week, I've seen, as you tend to see after a holiday like Christmas, a lot of people facing the loss of a loved one in their family, and wondering where to go, who to turn to, just trying to navigate how they're going to work their way and their family through that loss. One thing that has helped me, there is an album by Stephen Curtis Chapman called Beauty Will Rise. He lost his 5-year-old daughter some years ago, tragically, and his response to that loss was to do what was easy for him as far as grieving, and that was to write music and to write text to show his grief, to show his sorrow, but also to remind him that there is a greater power that he can turn to and that he knows that things will get better. And there is a song on there in particular that is called Jesus Will Meet You There, which is a great reminder for us that no matter what we're going through, no matter what bottom we think we've reached, even if that bottom falls out and we fall deeper into whatever it is we're in, that Jesus will meet us there. And he's able to meet us there because he already has been where we're going. So that's just something that I've used to get myself through. I know that the post-celebration of Christmas is always exciting, but I know it can also be sorrowful for many families out there. So we are sending prayers to you. We're thinking of you, and we just want you to know that there is a higher power. There is a God that loves you and is there for you in this time of sorrow. So let's take all these things that were either on Facebook or some of the things that were not said today, and let's enter together in a time of prayer as we pray the unison prayer on the screen. Would you please pray with me? What troubles we have seen in the year 2020, what conflicts, fightings, and fears. And yet, Lord, you have sustained us through it all. As we prepare for a new beginning in 2021, remind us again of your name, Emmanuel, and that you have come to be with us. Your word became flesh and moved into the neighborhood. No matter what we may face this year, Lord, we thank you that you know what is to come, and you have promised to be with us through it all. Amen.
Gracious and loving God, we do praise you today because you have promised to be with us. You've brought us through to this point, and you've promised never to leave us. Dear God, as we are aware that some people are mourning this year because if it was a holiday season the first time away from a loved one, we just pray for strength and grace for them, for April and her family, for others, dear Lord. And yet we know that there was still much to celebrate. There's still hope. There's still life ahead for all of us. And as you care for our loved ones who've gone on to be with you, you care for us. Gracious God, we pray that in this season in our nation with the transitions and the things that are happening, that you would use us as your church, the body, to bring a stable influence, a calming presence in our neighborhoods, in our nation. That indeed we might bring your peace and your justice to those around us. Gracious God, in all of it as well, while we know there are needs and there are great concerns for our world, there is also hope because we are not alone. You've given to us not only your Son Jesus, but each other. May we find joy and strength and hope in those relationships and follow the path that you have taught us. For we pray together now the prayer that Jesus taught us, saying, Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom and the power and the glory forever. Amen.
Hi, boys and girls. Today we're going to hear about how Jesus came to dwell among us. When Jesus came, he lived just like the people of his time did. He lived in the same type of house. He went to school. He ate the same food they did. He could have come and lived in the biggest mansion. He could have the best food ever. He could have had the coolest toys. What if he had his own YouTube channel? Man, he'd have a lot of followers, wouldn't he? No TV back then. He formed relationships with people by talking with them, sometimes one person at a time. In fact, 12 men became so impressed with what they heard, they followed him everywhere and told everyone what they were being taught. How amazing is it that God sent Jesus to be our friend? He wants to be your best friend, boys and girls, and he wants you to tell your friends about him. He made friends, and he would have loved to play games with his friends. I bet he would have really loved to play the snow that we have today.
Okay, here we are at the start of a new year. You know what often happens at the change in the calendar is people will look at that time frame and look back and review what happened and what was there, and also look ahead to think about what is yet to come. You know, it's a little bit too, and think about the time frame of our whole life, an opportunity to think about, boy, what is really important. And a year from now, where do I hope I'll be? And what will the outcome be? And so, in some ways, as we start this new sermon series about influence and Christian leadership in a social media world, we want to remember what it's all about and why we're here to begin with. And think about what it is that gives meaning to our lives. And when we're all said and done, what is it that we will have valued most and been most appreciative of? And I want to suggest to you that's what is most important is relationships. Relationships are everything. And as we look back on this past year, much of what we would have remembered are the relationships and what happened in those relationships with other people. And as we look ahead, we also might think about what kinds of relationships do we want to have and where do we want those relationships to go in the year ahead and even in our lifetime ahead. You see, to think about what gives our life meaning, what gives us purpose, isn't it the relationships that we have? The loved ones that we share our life with. So as we start this new sermon series about influence, Christian leadership in a social media world, we're starting with relationships. And about our relationship with God and how our relationship with God influences the people around us. And in the coming weeks, we'll also then apply that to the social media, how our world is changing. We'll be thinking about why we connect with people and recognizing how we connect is now very different than maybe it has been ever before. And yet the why doesn't change, and so we want to apply that why we connect with folks to the new ways of how we connect with people and talk about influence, Christian leadership in a social media world. So let's first think about why we connect and the very nature of who we are as human beings, but also how relationships are a central part, a core element of our relationship with God, and really the very essence of who God is. And so reading in the Gospel of John, what Michael shared with us, when John looked at the beginning, again, he's looking also at a time frame and going back to the very beginning. Not just the beginning of the story of Jesus' life on earth, he goes back to the very beginning of all time and echoes the words of Genesis and saying, in the beginning. And John uses that in saying, in the beginning was the Word. And again, John is speaking to a philosophical, Greek-oriented mind where the logos or the word was a concept that those philosophers and thinkers in the gospel writers' day would have had an understanding of. Yes, the word, the gathering of all the essence, the thoughts of God, and to put it into an expression. And this is part of where we get our Christian theology, that the Word was God, the Word was with God. When we think of Jesus as the Word, Jesus was the fullness of God pulled together in a human being. And by being part of the Trinity, the very essence of God, that somehow that Word, that presence, was there from the start. And it's interesting that he says, all things came into being through him, and without him not one thing came into being. And what has come into being in him was life. And notice how John says that this life, he describes it, this life was the light of all people. Now, when you think about light, again, that's also echoing the book of Genesis, the very beginning of the Bible. If you remember that story where it says, in the beginning, the very first act of creation was that God said, let there be light. and there was light. I mean, think about what light enables us to do. Light enables us to see. I mean, there'd be no life without light. And light also then enables us to have relationships with others. Because we can see where we are, we can see where they are, we can see how we relate and how we connect. Light, in a sense, it leads to relationships. Light enables relationships. Maybe light in its very nature is a connecting of people, things, everything. Light is all about relationships. But notice how, again, John is kind of giving the background. He says, the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness did not overcome it. Now, think with me for a moment about darkness. Have you ever been in complete darkness? I remember one time I was a pastor in the little town of B-Town, Wisconsin, southwest Wisconsin, and during the Civil War days, lead mining was a big industry there. They mined a lot of lead out of the hills, and there were several old lead mines that were there. And the people who lived in that part of Wisconsin knew of them, and they'd been charted and explored, and there were some that people would take tours of or go down. And so I went with a group one time into one of these old lead mines into the ground. We, hiked for a while, and we all had these headlamps on. And we got to a point where the guide said, all right, let's all sit down. Now, everybody turn off your light. And we turned off the light, and we're way underground. And I remember just feeling, my hand right there, couldn't see it. There were people all around, couldn't see them. My feeling of that experience of darkness was in a sense, an essence of isolation or being alone. I couldn't relate to the people by sight anymore. They were right next to me, but I couldn't see them without the light. And because of that, again, it felt creepy because I was all alone. I was isolated. That's what darkness does. And that's what God has sought to overcome by bringing us light. And not only physical light, but also the light in terms of an understanding and ability to connect with others in a relationship. Now, again, the gospel writer of John, he sort of gives a prelude or like a trailer for the movie that's going to come and the story that he's going to tell. And he talks about saying there was a man whose name was John, that would have been John the Baptist, and he came to testify to the light, and see how he's using again and again this image of light for Jesus and the Word. And so he came to testify to the light so that all might believe in him. But again, he wasn't the light. John the Baptist wasn't the light. He came to testify to the light, who was Jesus. Now that true light, which enlightens everyone, was coming into the world. Now again, it goes on to say, he was in the world. This is Jesus, was in the world. He came to his own, and yet the world did not know him. The world rejected him. And he came to who was his own people, they did not receive him. But to all who did receive him, who believed in his name, he gave power to become children of God, in a relationship with God, who were born not of blood and of the will of flesh or of the will of man, but of God. You see, Jesus enabled us to have that connection, to be able to see clearly about God and about other people. And it's like, oh, I'm not alone anymore. God is right here with me as well. All who believed and accepted that light received life and meaning and purpose. Now, at verse 14, then, here's where we see where the Word became flesh and lived among us. And we have seen his glory. God, the Creator, became flesh in Jesus, God the Son, and dwelled with us, pitched his tent in our neighborhood, came to be with us. That's the most amazing, incredible thing about God's light coming into the world, but God's very presence to dwell and live with us in a way that we can more clearly understand, we can more clearly see. And we have seen his glory, the glory of a Father's only Son. And again, John, the gospel writer, is talking about, this is sort of the summary of the whole gospel. And he's seen the nature of this relationship, the glory of a Father's only Son, full of grace and truth. And we talk about our relationship with God here clearly. John, the gospel writer, says it's full of grace, forgiveness, love. I mean, that's all combined in that word of grace, and truth, which also is light and awareness, being able to see. And so one of the things that as we start this new year as a congregation, and for you as a follower of Jesus, if you've made that decision and you're ready to do that, is we're saying as a church, the first thing we want to do is seek God's light. By trying to have that relationship with Jesus, to read in the Scriptures, to try to see the world from God's point of view, or recognize at least that our point of view is just ours. It's valid, it's important, but it's limited to only us and where we are. And what we want to do is seek an even broader understanding, to seek God's light, to be born from above, as John would later say in John chapter 3 at verse 16. That to be born again, or to be born from above, is to have to seek a relationship with the living God. A light and awareness that opens our eyes to see the reality from another perspective, from God's perspective. And so when our relationship with God, it is completely truthful, it is completely light, it is also completely love and grace and forgiveness. And that's why it is safe. That's why it is so good. So again, in the Gospel of John, he mentions how this relationship with God is full of grace and truth. You know, later in the Bible, there's the first letter of John. He writes 3 letters. The first one, though, in John chapter 1, at verse 4, this is 1 John chapter 1. He's repeating, this is the message that we've heard from the very beginning, that God is light. And in God, there's no darkness at all. The very nature of God is light, an awareness, to be able to see, to be able to relate, to be able to connect. And he goes on at verse 7, if we walk in the light as God himself is in the light, we have fellowship with one another. And the blood of Jesus, his Son, cleanses us from all sin. Again, that's 1 John chapter 1, verses 4 and verse 7. In other words, the very essence, the very nature of God is light, and if we walk in that light, have that relationship with God as Jesus has brought to us, but we can't help then to have fellowship with one another. And to see the light, to see other people in the light of God's light, as God's love. And to hear the words, again, of Jesus, to love God with everything we've got, our heart, soul, mind, and strength, that relationship with God. But that has to lead to a relationship with other people. To love your neighbor as yourself. That's a relationship. That's what we've been created for from the very beginning. Again, the stories in the Old Testament of the book of Genesis, God created light, but when God created humankind, Adam and Eve, when it was first Adam, God said it's not good to be alone. And created a companion, Adam and Eve. And the good news is that God desires this relationship to be with us. And God desires for us to be in a relationship with others. And so Jesus is the light who's come into the world to enable that to happen. Here at the Asbury Church, we use the words about how Jesus is the bridge who connects us with God and with one another. And so as we start out this new year, that's what we're all about, relationships. A relationship with the living God that is then reflected in our relationships with one another. It's walking in the light. It's seeking God's light and then allowing that to shape how we relate to each other. And so now we're talking about connections with one another. and how it is we connect. And the reality that we now live in this social media world, the ways in which we connect are greatly different. And so again, with social media, and it can be a great tool. Right now, you're watching over the internet, over the either our Facebook page or perhaps our YouTube video at some point. It's live for those of us who are watching, but later on, people may watch as it's recorded. And there is a connection, there is a relationship that's happening. And yet it's different than it has ever happened previously before this technology was available. And there's great potential for good, but there's also great potential for misuse and evil. You know, as we venture now into this social media world as a church, and again, I'm a digital immigrant. This is not the world that I grew up in. And yet for my kids and my grandkids, they're digital natives. They'll never have known anything other than the internet and Facebook and Snapchat and cell phones and instant access to information from all around the world. So in the church, our mission is to connect with people with each generation and use the tools, the means by which we have available to us now. And so that's why one of the goals for this coming year as a church, we want to continue to improve our online presence as a way to reach other people and connect with them. In many ways, it's following the example of Francis Asbury, the first Methodist bishop that this congregation is named after. He used the technology of his day to connect with people, but it just happened to be a horse. But he rode that horse for thousands of miles to be where the people were so that he could have a relationship with them and share with them the light of God's love and God's truth. Again, we want to be cautious going into this, and there is a documentary I've referred to before, The Social Dilemma, that again, I encourage folks to take a look at that. I think there'll be a link in the chat. And it says, I mean, it is a dangerous world out there as well. But if we're connected to God, we go with the hope, the Spirit, the love of God with us and venture out into that world. We need to do it safely and with connections and always checking our own motivations as well. Because again, as I've been researching this, again, the title of our sermon series is Influencer. And I've been learning about a whole new ways in terms of who are the influencers today using that social media. For example, I looked up and again, generational folks, for some of us, like, really, that's how that works. Young people says, of course that's how it's worked. That's all we've ever known. But influencers technically are people who, by their social media posts, can influence people's decisions about what they do. And so marketers and advertisers and companies are very much aware of this. They try to make use of that, and they want to get influencers to promote their products as a way to try to increase their sales. So, for example, there's a mega influencer, and I read about this. There's again a link that you can maybe see on the chat in terms of how advertisers are making use of this. A mega influencer has more than 1 million viewers on a single platform. 1 million viewers by 1 million viewers on one platform. Now, they get paid a lot of money just to put something out that on Twitter or Facebook or Instagram or something, if they think it's cool to buy it, then the potential is that other people will want to buy it as well. Or there's macro influencers, 40,000 to 1 million viewers. Or there are micro influencers. Micro, again, this is a small group, and those are between 1,000 and 40,000 followers on some type of a platform. Now, again, this is a new thing. I've got a nephew who's a great photographer, but in his college years, he was taking pictures, and on Instagram, he had over 40,000 followers. And we're following his pictures. He was an influencer, and he was aware that some companies would be willing to pay him money to review their products or to take a trip and talk about what it is. So that's how our world now has been changing. Now, not that you're ever going to be a mega influencer or a macro or even a micro influencer, but potentially a nano influencer. That the influence that you have on maybe just one or two or three other people can be something significant. And the whole idea that because you have relationships, there's people that you interact with, you also have influence. And you can influence those people in a positive way by your attitude, by your example, by what you do. Part of what I want us to really be aware of today, all of us have the power to influence others. Maybe not in a macro scale with thousands and thousands of followers on Instagram or whatever it might be, but in the day-to-day relationships that we have with people, indeed, we can have an influence on them. And I want you to be aware of and always evaluating what is your influence. It's been said that everybody has the potential to light up a room. Some people when they come, and some people when they go. I want you to be somebody who lightens up a room when you come and has a positive influence on the people around you. But part of that happens then in terms of who is influencing us, to be aware of people who are influencing us. And as people venture out into that social media world, again, the dangers, the reality is that some people are trying to influence you by what they can get from you. They want you to buy a product. They want you to believe in some kind of a way. You just have to be aware. If you're not don't know specifically who's on the other side of that tweet, of that message, of that email, we've got to be cautious. There have been people in the church who've been scammed by somebody getting a message, and it says it's from the pastor, and they say, will you buy some gift cards and send them to this email address? And it's a scam. That's where part of it's dangerous. We've got to be aware of the interactions that we have and aware, is there somebody on the other side that I know that I can trust that this is a safe relationship? Because again, people will either want to be getting something from you or be willing to give you something. And that's not only true from the information, the tweets that we get from other people, it's also to evaluate the interactions that we give off and to be honest ourselves. Are we wanting to give something to others or are we wanting to get something? I mean, the internet, the technology is changing so many of the ways that we think and act. And here's one invention that I think is also having an effect, and it's the selfie stick. I mean, how many of our posts on internet are all about me? Now, I've got a selfie stick. I've done it some. I can fall into that. But think about how that's shaping the interactions that we have. Does it give me the glory? Do I do it for the likes that I might get? Do I get my value, my self-worth because of how many people react to my post and like it? And to say I've got 100 likes or 1,000 likes or all kinds of likes, is that a real relationship? And am I getting something like affirmation from that social media post when it's focused on me? There's a good picture of me. Or is it some way that we can also be telling a story that ultimately gives glory to God? And I mean, I put pictures of my grandkids up there and they're proud of them. I love them. Hopefully there's a way of saying, I thank God for them. And I've put pictures of our trips and things. Here's the story of what we've done. But sometimes instead of just a picture of me, it's kind of like, here's where I've been. And somehow still to think about how do I give glory to God. And so it's not just about me. It's about the wonders of this national park or whatever it might be. Somehow still thinking about how can I turn this to give glory for God and influence other people to help them think about what's most important and their relationship with God. You know, it's been said that, how many people really can you influence? There's something called the Dunbar number. There was an Oxford professor, psychologist, that came up with a number that said basically you can really only have a relationship with about 150 people. That you really know their name, they know you, you can interact with them in any kind of a meaningful way, where there's really truth in terms of you know them, and love, there's a connection, a compassion that you have for them. And so when we have things where we say, I've got 1,000 friends on Facebook, do you really? I mean, so here's what I'll have then an assignment for you. And that is to think about even venturing into this social media world. Some of you have already been there. I know generationally, some of folks that are listening right now, this is all new to them and they've not experienced this before, and they're not going to experience it. But the reality is, whoever you are, you have influence because you have relationships. And the challenge is, how can you be aware to use your influence in a positive way in the relationships that you have? And I want to suggest, first of all, that you be one who receives what's most important for you in your life from your relationship with God. Your self-worth, your dignity, your value, that you receive that from God. That God has said, I love you. I forgive you. I've sent my Son so that you might know life. That you receive from God so that when you're in interactions and tweets and other things with other people, you don't have to receive from them. You can actually be giving to them part of what you've received from God. And so to think about any of your social media posts or however it is that you venture out as a church, we want to get better at how we have an online presence. We're learning as we go. But we want it to be not what we can get from people, what we can give to them. Because we get our value, our self-worth from what God has done for us in Jesus, for the Word, the light who's come to us in Jesus. That's really that fills our cup up so that we can then simply give to others. And we're not trying to get something from them, even if it's just get them to like us so that we feel good about how many likes we get on Facebook or whatever it might be. So here's then, again, your assignment to think of two people, and I want you to pray about this and ask God to reveal to you two people who you can have a positive influence, who need a positive influence in their life. And actually, I want to make it even easier for you. One of those people ought to be you. And put your name on that list first. To think about who needs a positive influence, you do. And let that be from God. And also then from other people who you know have your best interests in mind. They want to build you up. They want to support you because they love you. They've shown that to you. And let them influence you. And then out of that relationship where you receive your love, your affirmation from God, from those godly relationships, then you can have a positive influence on a relationship that you have. Again, pray about that. God, who do you want me to have a positive influence in their life? Could be a coworker, a child, a grandchild, a spouse, or even somebody that God will bring to your attention this week. And then think about how can I give to that person the light, the love, the grace that I've received from God? How can I set a positive example of how to be a follower of Jesus, how to live in the light, in peace and joy and happiness and deep meaning out of relationships that I can share with them? Okay, are you ready to take that on? Next week, we'll talk more about trust, and we'll continue on this month about how we make a positive influence. Keep that person's name in your mind. Look for how God can use you this week to have a positive influence in their life, and potentially use the social media things that you might have at your disposal. Every post, every tweet, everything, to be thinking about how does this reflect to have a positive influence on whoever will read it. All right? Well, to conclude our time together, Michael Reese has recorded a hymn for us, a great song that talks about the Word of God, how the Word of God has come to be with us. And so let's listen to that song now. Word of God, speak.
Finding myself at a loss for words, and the funny thing is, it's okay. The last thing I need is to be heard, but to hear what you would say. Word of God, speak. Would you pour down like rain, washing my eyes to see your majesty, to be still and know that you're in this place. Please let me stay and rest in your holiness. Word of God, speak. Finding myself in the midst of you, beyond the music, beyond the noise. All that I need is to be with you, and in the quiet, hear your voice. Word of God, speak. Pour down like rain, washing my eyes to see your majesty, to be still and know that you're in this place. Please let me stay and rest in your holiness. Word of God, speak. Would you pour down like rain, washing my eyes to see your majesty, to be still and know that you're in this place. Please let me stay and rest in your holiness. Finding myself at a loss for words, and the funny thing is, it's okay.
Hey, thank you, Michael. So, Word of God, speak. Help us to listen, and specifically this week, listen for a name that God wants to have a positive influence in their life through you. And even the social media aspects might be a tool by which you use to make that connection, to develop that relationship. You know, next week we'll pick it up as we think more about trust and developing how important that is in our world. But right now, those of you that are willing to come and share in the sacrament of communion will do that at 11:15 in the street right outside front of the church, because that's probably the best illustration of how Jesus gave himself for us, how we can receive from God so that we can give ourselves for others. So as you go out into the world, we start this new year together as a church. We're remembering that Jesus is the bridge who connects us to God and to each other. Go forth now in the name and the power of God the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, now and always. Amen.